Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This story is narrated in 2 books. Book 1. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a newspaper, magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the actual life of a Muslim family in Sudan. Therefore, all names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Chapter 47. In a Protected Custody. Among all Christians who escaped that cowardly terrorist attack, Pastor Wahid and Natasha have been extremely astonished and frightened when they came to know through the police authority that in his confession the prime suspect, the Muslim apostate Jamal, mentioned that they are his primary targets. The mastermind of the disrupted terrorist plot, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, told Jamal that if Pastor Wahid and his wife Natasha are not present at the Christmas party, he should postpone the attack. Consequently, for the safety of other citizens, Pastor Wahid and Natasha Muhammad Ahmed have been temporarily banned by the police authority from attending any church meeting or any other Christian gathering. The police of Calgary expected that Sheikh Yasser would keep on trying to murder them and therefore along with them harm many innocent people. For that reason, for their protection and the safety of other Christian people, the police placed the family of Muhammad Ahmed into a temporarily protected custody. No one is informed where Pastor Wahid, his wife Natasha, and their 2 children, Nadia and Sami Shams al-Din, have been sent. In the meantime, the police of Calgary have sent the Muhammad Ahmed family to a small town in the province of Ontario. That town is on the outskirts of Toronto City. The distance from Calgary to Toronto is approximately 2,700 kilometers. The airplane's flying time from Calgary, in Alberta Province, to Toronto, in Ontario Province, is 3 hours and 38 minutes. The driving distance by car between the 2 cities is 3,412 kilometers, or 2,120 miles. If the family decided to defy the decision of the police authority and drive back to their city, they might need a 3 to 4 days road trip plus spending 3 nights in motels. So, the family felt as if they had been exiled to another country. Pastor Wahid and Natasha's names have been changed to Samir and Nadia, and their children are renamed Natalie and Joshua. The family's last name has been changed to Ahmad, albeit in their social insurance numbers, driver's licenses, and other official documents their names remain the same. Samir and Nadia Ahmad have to pretend to be Muslims converted to Christianity while they were staying in a refugee camp in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Nadia's perfect knowledge of the official language of Ethiopia Amharic would make their claim convincing to anyone who might doubt it. They are expected to live in that town for 6 months, and then they would be allowed to move to Toronto City. However, the police banned the family from returning to Calgary or any other city in Western Canada. The Calgary police understood that Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din's main targets are to destroy the family of Muhammad Ahmed. By hiding his targets, the police expected that they would stop him from plotting to kill Pastor Wahid and Natasha, and that would also prevent him from harming other innocent people. Going back to the days before the police foiled that terrorist attack, Pastor Wahid and Natasha became particularly good friends with Jamal and Halima. When some Sudanese Christians brought Jamal for the first time to the church, Pastor Wahid was the first person to welcome him and invite him for food in his apartment. As a matter of fact, Pastor Wahid has a great passion for those Muslims who took the risk and forsook their religion while they were in their Muslim countries. He knew that for an apostate Muslim in the Muslim world it would mean a question of life and death. Therefore, Pastor Wahid welcomed Jamal as a hero and invited him for food. When Jamal's wife accepted Christianity, Pastor Wahid and Natasha visited them in their apartment and prayed with Halima. In addition, Pastor Wahid always used his vehicle to help the family in their shopping. For 3 months, whenever the Somali family needed any help, Pastor Wahid and Natasha were always there for them. They invited them for food twice in their apartment and took them 3 times for food in a famous Arabic restaurant, an Ethiopian restaurant, and Indian cuisine. In a short time, Natasha and Halima became particularly good girlfriends. Natasha gave Halima one of her loveliest dresses to put on for the Christmas party. Pastor Wahid bought Christmas gifts for the 7 children of Halima. When Pastor Wahid and Natasha heard about the terrorist plot and learned that they are the main targets of that attack, they could not believe it. They have become exceedingly shocked and extremely frightened when they learn that Jamal is supposed to blow himself up in the Christmas party and kill everyone, including his wife and her 7 children. They could not understand how a person could be so devoid of mercy and follow the evil plot of his terrorist leader, and decided to murder those innocent children of Halima who have done nothing wrong to them. Why did he want to kill Pastor Wahid and Natasha, who showed him so much love? Muhammad Ahmed family always used to sit beside the Somali family in the church. If the police did not disrupt that cowardly plot, then Pastor Wahid, Natasha, and their 2 children Nadia and Sammy would be the first ones to be blown up in bits and pieces. Pastor Wahid is the one who always brought in his van the Somali family to the church and after the service dropped them back in their apartment. Therefore, if Calgary police did not foil that plot, then Pastor Wahid would have brought his assassin in his own vehicle to the Christmas party where the latter is planning to blow his body up in smithereens and kill with him as many as possible of those innocent Christians. Accordingly, the Muhammad Ahmed 4 family members have been forced against their wishes to leave their city, church, friends, colleges, and go to a ridiculously small place in eastern Canada. They have been banned forever from returning to the city where they always used to live in. They felt that they had been punished for a crime that they had no hands in it. Moreover, they understood that their continuous presence in Calgary would pose a threat to the lives of many innocent people. Because of them, the evil terrorist leader Sheikh Yasser had killed before over 500 innocent people. Therefore, they have reluctantly accepted the new arrangements and agreed to abide by the law. But they are worried that they might be in the run from the evil man Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din for the rest of their lives. By then, a couple of weeks have remained for Pastor Wahid's mother to arrive in Canada. She's supposed to arrive a few weeks before that terrorist plot had been disrupted by the police. After the family moved from Alberta to Ontario, the arrival of Mrs. Mary Morgus became problematic. Pastor Wahid and Natasha became jobless and stopped going to their colleges. Therefore, their student loans have been stopped too. Their income became zero except for the little money they are receiving as social assistance. They have been banned from returning to their city and also not permitted to go to any other big city until they would spend 6 months in their protected custody in that small town. For that reason, Pastor Wahid proposed to postpone the arrival of his mother until they move after 6 months to Toronto and find work and stable income. Nonetheless, Natasha insisted that they should go ahead with their plan and bring her mother-in-law according to the scheduled time of her trip. So, the arrival of Mrs. Mary Morgus has been changed from Calgary to Toronto. Initially, her flight was supposed to follow the route Khartoum, Frankfurt, Calgary, but they changed it to Khartoum, London, Toronto. Chapter 48. The Ideal Mother-in-Law. Mrs. Mary Morgus arrived in Canada at a time her son and his family have neither place of their own nor stable income. Even so, it is one of the happiest days for Samir and Nadia Ahmad. After many years, Samir is able to see the woman who took care of him from the day he was born until he reached 18 years of age. She is more than a mother to him. She is the savior of his life. When everyone rejected him and treated him as an outcast and parasite, she sheltered him with love and care. Samir has never felt any love for his biological mother. When he grew up, he learned that his mother gave birth to him, and she walked away from his life forever. He hated his mother with passion and despised his father with bitterness. He concluded that his mother buried him in that orphanage and forgot about him, as if she gave birth to a dead body and dumped it in the graveyards and walked away. At least, the mother who killed and buried her newborn infant might come again to pay homage to him. But his mother felt great relief when that scandal came out of her womb. Samir thought that, after his mother got rid of her scandal of the Wad al-Haram or illegitimate son, Most probably, she went back to her people and got married and led a decent life. She might have children with her lawful husband. Therefore, he might have some siblings somewhere in Sudan. When he was in Khartoum, he always visualized that his mother was somewhere in the capital city living with her lawful husband and her halal children. She did not know how much he had to pay for the few minutes of pleasure she enjoyed in bed with his heartless father. He also did not rule out the possibility that his biological mother might have committed adultery again with his father and gave birth to another illegitimate baby. She might also have been slain in honor killing by her Muslim father. Worse than that, his mother might have run away from her family and become a prostitute in another city. For that reason, as much as he loves his Christian parents, Samir hates and despises his biological parents who abandoned their own son. When Mrs. Mary Morgus arrived in Canada, he felt his own mother has come to him. He is extremely overjoyed to see her face and hear her voice again. But there is a huge difference in her appearance and his looks. No one would believe the white Coptic woman is the actual mother of the dark-skinned boy Samir. She looks like an Egyptian Coptic Christian woman, and he looks like a typical northerner Sudanese Muslim. Mrs. Mary Morgus is an exceptionally loving and friendly woman. She was 60 years old when she lost her husband, who was 70 years old. But she looked as if she was in her late 40s. She always takes care of her health and looks. She is an exceedingly healthy and very active woman. Nadia loved her from the first day she met her. She found her to be a very friendly woman and has a pleasant smile that is always decorating her serene face. She seemed that she has never hated any person in all her life. She is full of love and joy. As soon as she saw her lovely 2 grandchildren, she expressed her joy and happiness. She hugged and kissed them many times. Samir and Nadia decided never to reveal anything about how they had their second baby. They understood that Mrs. Mary Morgus arrived at a perfect time. After those horrifying days, she came and brought so much joy and happiness with her. They concluded that God has sent her to fill their hearts with joy unspeakable and shower their children with the happiness of a kind grandmother. Nadia always longed for the love of a mother, and when her mother-in-law arrived, she felt that dream had been fulfilled. Mrs. Mary Morgus is a unique woman. She is not only loving and friendly, but she is a well-organized woman. She loved to see everything neat and clean. Her many years of running an orphanage made her be a highly organized and disciplined woman. She brought up other mothers' children and took care of 13 illegitimate sons and daughters. When she arrived at her son's house, she learned that Nadia lost her mother when she was a baby, and hence, she understood that she had never experienced the love of a mother or being trained in how to take care of her home and children. So, Mrs. Mary Morgus felt that it was her duty to train her daughter-in-law in those basic household duties. But she does not want to hurt the feelings of Nadia. She began to refer to her days when she was young and how her mother taught her to do this thing and avoid doing that thing. She also began to tell Nadia how she used to run her orphanage and how she managed to look after those 13 orphaned and abandoned children. Nadia got the idea and therefore obeyed the example of her mother-in-law. In a short time, Mrs. Mary Morgus made many changes in the apartment. Their apartment became tidy and clean. The 2 babies are fed at regular times. They have been trained to sleep and wake up at the right time. They have also become toilet trained. Nadia found more time than she used to have before her loving mother-in-law came to live with them. Mrs. Mary Morgus encouraged her to go back to the university and continue her education. She promised that she would take care of her grandchildren. As soon as the family completed their 6 months of that compulsory protected custody, they moved to Toronto City. Nadia got admission to Toronto University and returned to her classes. Samir too found a Bible college and resumed his theological education. Shortly after their arrival in Toronto, the family found an Arabic church and began to attend it. Everyone in that church knows them by their new names: Samir, Nadia, Natalie, and Joshua Ahmad. They informed the church that they converted from Islam to Christianity while they were living in a refugee camp in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. When Mrs. Mary Morgus arrived in Canada, Samir told her that Nadia's father is living in Calgary. When he learned his daughter fell in love with a Christian pastor and forsook her Islamic religion and became a Christian, he decided to kill her as an apostate and murder her boyfriend who supposedly brainwashed her. For that reason, they ran away from Calgary and came to hide from him in that small town. In order to return to a big city, they must hide their identities by changing their names. Being lived all her life in a strict Muslim country like Sudan, Mrs. Mary Morgus knows a great danger that involved when someone openly forsook Islam and became a Christian. Therefore, she sincerely believed the story she was told and promised to keep their old identities as top secret. Mrs. Mary Morgus has been introduced to the new church in Toronto as the real mother of Samir Ahmad. She was born and brought up as a Coptic Christian. When she was young, she fell in love with her Muslim neighbor. Against the wishes of her family, she married her Muslim lover but continued to be a Christian. When her son Samir was born, his father made him a Muslim. But after the death of his Sudanese Muslim father, his Christian mother converted him into Christianity and took him every Sunday to the church. Although she converted him to her religion, his Coptic mother couldn't change his last name Ahmad and give him her last Christian name Morgus. When her Christian son Samir Ahmad grew up and immigrated to Canada, he joined a Bible college and became a pastor of 3 churches in Western Canada. However, later Samir met the Sudanese Muslim girl Nadia in Canada, fell in love with her and married her. Through him, Nadia was introduced to the Lord Jesus Christ. Her Sudanese father is a big Muslim religious leader in Western Canada. When her Muslim father learned his daughter fell in love with a Christian pastor and forsook her Islamic religion and became an infidel Christian, he decided to kill her as an apostate and murder her boyfriend who supposedly brainwashed her. For that reason, she and her husband fled from Western Canada and came to Eastern Canada to hide in Toronto City. That is the way the family told their story of persecution in the Arabic church in Toronto. Therefore, everyone in that church knows them as Samir, Nadia, Joshua, and Natalie. Notwithstanding, in their apartment, Mrs. Mary Morgus called her son Wahid, her daughter-in-law Natasha, and her grandchildren, Nadia and Sammy. Chapter 49. Mr. Muhammad John. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din has once again become extremely outraged when he came to know that his long-range and flawless plot has been foiled by the Canadian police and his man Jamal has been arrested a few hours before he could carry out his martyrdom. He is informed through an email that the Somali woman who came with his man is the one who spoiled the suicidal attack at the last moment. Sheikh Yasser, as much as he loves women, he never trusts them. He loves their bodies and hates their brains. For him, the woman is a body without a brain. He believes that God created the woman for the bed and production of children. His wicked mind is full of those misogynistic teachings of his prophet about women. His religion taught him that the woman is deficient in intellect and religion, is a crooked rib, she has been cursed before she was born, and her mind is always possessed by demons. He believes that because of the woman Satan was able to deceive Adam and sent him out of paradise. Simply put, as a Muslim man, he believes the woman is Satan in a human form. His prophet confirmed his belief when he said, "When the woman comes, she comes in the form of Satan, and when she retreats in the form of the devil." Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 3240. He also remembered the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad in which he said to a group of women, "I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man can be led astray by you." Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith number 301 and number 856. Tirmizi reported that the Prophet said, "The woman is a wara. When she goes outside the house, the devil takes charge of her." Tirmizi, volume 2, page 65. This hadith said that whenever the woman goes out of her house, she will be possessed by demons. So, she is dangerous to society and hence she should be confined to her house. There is no definition so widely used and accepted among Muslims for defining the woman than "the woman is an awara." The word awara is defined in the Encyclopedia of Islam as the external genitals, especially of the female, citing Hack and Newton, 1996, page 5. So, to translate that phrase literally, the Prophet Muhammad said, "The woman is a mere pussy and nothing else." And that is the way Sheikh Yasser and millions of Muslim men see the woman, as a pussy, and that is why the Quran orders Muslim women to cover their bodies from head to feet. Ibn Taymiyyah said, "Women used to roam about without cloaks, jilbabs, and men used to see their faces and hands. But when the verse stating, 'O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to wrap their cloaks over themselves,' Surah Al-Ahzab 33, verse number 59, was revealed, then this was prohibited, and women were ordered to wear the jilbab or burqas." Then Ibn Taymiyyah goes on to say, the word jilbab means a sheet, which Ibn Masud explained as a cloak covering the entire body, including the head, face, and hands. Therefore, it is not permissible for the women to reveal their faces and hands in public. Ibn Taymiyyah's book on Fatwas, page number 110, volume 2, also mentioned in the book Hijab, page number 15. Al-Bukhari narrated that Aisha said, "May Allah have mercy on the first Muhajirin women. When Allah revealed the words, and to draw their veils all over Juyubihinna, their bodies, faces, necks, and bosoms, they tore their aprons and covered their faces with them." Allah in Islam never entrusts serious matters in Muslim society to women, such as jihad, interpretation of the sacred religious texts, and leadership. Sheikh Yasser has recollected that his Prophet warned his followers from entrusting women with anything important in life. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Those who entrust their affairs to a woman will never know prosperity." The Prophet said, "I have not left any calamity after me more detrimental to men than women." Al-Bukhari and Muslim agreed upon this hadith. Al-Bukhari, volume 7, hadith number 33. Therefore, Sheikh Yasser concluded that it is the biggest mistake he did in his life was sending Jamal to Kenya and asking him to look for a woman to join him on his trip to Canada. He wished that he had sent him with Satan the devil instead of sending him with an accursed Somali Muslim woman who became an apostate infidel and spoiled his long-range flawless mission. So, the evil genius decided never to involve again a woman in his future terrorist attack. Sheikh Yasser has been informed that the Calgary police sent Pastor Wahid and his apostatized daughter Natasha and their two Wad Haram and Bint Haram children into protected custody, and no one knows where they have been sent. Nonetheless, the wicked sheikh knew that it would not be difficult for him to find them. This time, he determined to plan their murder directly without targeting other infidels along with them. He wanted to find a killer, send him in a mission to Canada, and command him to find those two accursed apostates and murder them. He anticipated that wherever the police have hidden them, Pastor Wahid and Natasha would go to a Sudanese church or an Arabic church. Accordingly, he decided to send his killer to search for them in every Sudanese church and Arabic church and all over the Canadian cities. After long deliberation, Sheikh Yasser realized that such a job needed a professional killer. He knows that none of his Somali mujahideen could track down someone and kill him in Canada. Those mujahideen have been trained to carry out suicidal missions. They know only how to blow themselves up in crowded places and take the lives of many people along with them. When he understood that his job needed a professional killer, Sheikh Yasser recollected the 8 years he spent in that maximum security penitentiary in Western Canada. He began to look for those criminals with whom he spent those years of his incarceration. He remembered that through his religious group in jail, he was able to win 3 criminals to his Islamic faith. Those criminals were converted into terrorists after embracing Islam. Sheikh Yasser expected that his mission would be carried out successfully if he was able to get hold of one of those dedicated converts. Out of the 3, he remembered that one of them came to him for help after he served his term in jail. He helped him in finding shelter and supported him financially for a long time. He even found for him an African Muslim immigrant girl who is originally from Tanzania and got her married to him. Sheikh Yasser decided to contact that Muslim brother and his ex-jailmate and bribe him in carrying out his mission. Muhammad John is the man that Sheikh Yasser decided to get hold of and bribe him into his wicked scheme. Muhammad John was known as Peter John before he met Sheikh Yasser in jail and converted to Islam in his hands. The convict Mr. Peter John is a rapist, murderer, thief, and notorious child abuser. He is also a professional killer who killed for money. When he was arrested and convicted, he was designated as a dangerous offender and sentenced to indefinite imprisonment. However, after he was converted to Islam and changed his name from John to Muhammad, his religiosity, like that of Sheikh Yasser, convinced the jail authority that he changed and became a good religious man. Accordingly, he was set free after serving 19 years in a maximum security prison. Muhammad John entered the jail when he was 30 years old, and when he was released in parole, he was 49. When he came out of jail, he was homeless and jobless. He then contacted his prison inmate, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, and asked him for help. Sheikh Yasser helped him in finding a place to live in and paid his monthly rents. When Muhammad John began to regularly attend the mosque and did not go back to his drugs and alcohol addictions, Sheikh Yasser convinced an African poor Muslim man to marry his 20-year-old daughter to his ex-jail mate Mr. Muhammad John. Muhammad John was shocked when he slept with that African girl and found out that she was a virgin. He ran to his ex-jail mate and kissed his hands and feet and thanked him 1,000,000 times for that virgin. As a matter of fact, Mr. Muhammad John had never married or fell in love with a woman before. No woman in the entire world would fall in love or marry such a notorious criminal. Therefore, the only way he could have sex with a female before was either through raping his female fellow gangsters or kidnapping and raping other female victims. At any rate, after his marriage, Sheikh Yasser found for him a job in a small Arabic store that sells halal meat and other immigrant ethnic commodities. The last thing he heard about his ex-jailmate is that he settled down after marrying that African girl and finding a job in that Arabic store. Sheikh Yasser, through his contacts in Calgary, could be able to find his former inmate and disclosed his deal to him and promised to pay him a huge amount of money. Muhammad John gladly accepted the deal. According to the deal, Muhammad has to search for 2 Sudanese Muslims converted to Christianity. According to the Islamic Sharia, those apostates must be put to death for leaving Islam and converting to Christianity. Then, Sheikh Yasser informed Muhammad John that the apostate wife of that accursed Sudanese priest is his own daughter, and as a religious leader, he would be held accountable by Allah and his beloved Prophet on the Day of Judgment if he does not punish his apostatized daughter and her accursed husband who brainwashed her and converted her to the religion of the infidel Christians. He then told him recently the police of Calgary sent his rebellious daughter and her accursed husband into protected custody somewhere in Canada. Sheikh Yasser guessed that most probably the police changed the names of those apostates in order to hide their identities. He sent to his ex-jail mate through email the old names of Pastor Wahid and his daughter. He also sent as attachments to his email the photos of Natasha, which he found in one of the emails that were sent to him. Her photos were found in those newspapers that covered his rape and murder attempt to his daughter Natasha. He instructed him that he should depend on his search for the photos of Natasha rather than her name. He has no photo of Pastor Wahid, but he told his killer that wherever Natasha is found, her husband would be with her. When Muhammad John accepted the deal and promised to search for the accursed apostatized Sudanese couple, Sheikh Yasser paid 1/3 of the amount and promised to pay the other 2/3 when the apostatized couple has been found and murdered. There is no time limit for the deal. The deal would cease only after Muhammad John would successfully carry out the mission. Somehow, Sheikh Yasser convinced Muhammad John that what he is going to do for him is not a murder in the eyes of Allah, but religious obligation and jihad. He quoted for him the famous hadith of the Prophet Muhammad when he commanded his followers, saying, "Whosoever forsakes Islam, kill him." Chapter 50. The Unexpected Question. Wahid and Natasha settled in Toronto, and their life became wonderful after Mrs. Mary Morgas came to live with them. She took full responsibility for the house and the children. Wahid and Natasha began to concentrate on their studies and left everything for their wonderful mother. Wahid found a part-time job and continued his studies at a Bible college. He attends his classes during the morning, and in the afternoon, he goes to his part-time job. Natasha takes full-time classes, but she spends most of her evenings with her mother-in-law. When they arrived newly in Toronto, they came to know that there are 8 Sudanese churches. Every tribe in the south of Sudan opened a church, and only that tribe men and women are expected to attend that church. Wahid and Natasha decided not to join any Sudanese church. Firstly, they do not like the idea of having a tribal church instead of a church open to all people regardless of their ethnic backgrounds. Secondly, they scared that in a Sudanese church their hidden identities might be revealed, and through that, the evil terrorist man Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din might find his way to reach them and kill them and harm other innocent people along with them. However, the family found a Coptic Christian church and joined it. It is their kind mother, Mrs. Mary Morgas, who requested them to join a Coptic church instead of any other Arabic immigrant church. In the meantime, Natasha and her mother-in-law became so attached to each other as if they were true mother and her daughter or old friends. Their friendship is like that of Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi. Every evening, Mrs. Mary Morgas prepares the best Sudanese tea that Natasha likes so much. Also, the loving mother knows how to prepare those Sudanese cakes, known as zalabia. Then, Mrs. Mary Morgas, Natasha, and her children sit in the living room and consume that tea with the Sudanese cakes. It is the most wonderful time of the day for all of them. Unfortunately, Wahid works until 7 o'clock, and when he returns home, his family members are ready for dinner. He misses the tea and zalabia time, which takes place between 4 and 5 o'clock in the evening. After the tea was over, Natasha would go to her room to do her homework or prepare herself for a test. While she is doing her study, Mrs. Mary Morgas takes care of the children. That is the daily routine for the family except for Saturdays and Sundays. On those 2 days, the daily routine would change because Wahid and Natasha do not need to go out of the house. In those days, Wahid would get a chance to spend more time with his wife, children, and mother. In that wonderful atmosphere, the happy family completed 3 months from the time they came out of their protected custody and moved to Toronto. That wonderful life would have gone forever if not for an evening discussion that turned the life of that happy family upside down, as if a sudden powerful earthquake or a mighty volcanic erupted inside that beautiful home. On one evening, while Natasha was sitting in the living room and having evening tea with her loving mother-in-law and 2 children, Mrs. Mary Morgas asked her a simple, straightforward question. That simple question would soon cause great upheaval to rise in Natasha's mind. "What is the meaning of your name, Natasha?" asked Mrs. Mary Morgas innocently. "I don't know the meaning of my name," answered Natasha, frankly. "What?" said Mrs. Mary Morgas until the tea spilled out of her cup. "You don't know the meaning of your name?" "Believe me, mother, I have no clue what the word Natasha stands for." "Why hadn't you asked your parents what Natasha means?" "For sure, since they gave you that name, they knew what it meant. My parents died in a car accident in Khartoum City when I was a few days old. It is my grandfather who gave me that name and brought me up. He renamed me after my mother because he wanted to keep the memory of his beloved daughter Natasha, who died when she was a young woman after she gave birth to me. But you had told me your father is in the city of Calgary and he is looking for you to kill you for your conversion from Islam to Christianity and marrying my Christian son." Natasha realized her mistake, corrected it quickly, and tried to change that topic. "I am sorry, mother. I meant to say that my mother died when I was a baby, but my father's still alive. By the way, if you know the meaning of Natasha, please let me know." Natasha decided to shift the attention of the shrewd woman from investigating her lie to the meaning of her name. "I don't know either what Natasha means. I heard this name only twice in my life. The first time I heard it was many years ago. A beautiful young girl came with her parents to our orphanage. She is called Natasha too. The second time I heard the name was when I met you. I have never heard a Sudanese girl or any Arab girl called Natasha except you and that girl." "Really, you have heard it twice only," said Natasha, and thanked God in her heart for not being questioned further for lying to her mother-in-law. She also felt relieved when she thought the inquiry into her peculiar name had ended there. She herself has never heard of a girl who has the name Natasha except her late mother and herself. "I think Natasha is not an Arabic name. Most probably it is a European name," continued Mrs. Mary Morgas on the same topic that Natasha thought it had ended. Natasha has become a bit puzzled by the conclusion of her mother-in-law. She wants to know why she thought that Natasha is a foreign name and not an Arabic name. Mother, what made you think that Natasha is a European name? You just told me that you had met only 2 girls by that name? Was that girl who came long ago to your orphanage a foreigner? She wasn't fully a foreigner. Her mother is a white woman, and her father is a Sudanese man. Okay, Mother. So, that is why you think my name is a foreign name. I don't know. I might be wrong too. You are a pure Sudanese girl, still, you have the same name. The inquiry into the meaning of Natasha's unique name ended there. Even so, that innocent question came up again when Natasha asked her husband what her mother-in-law had asked her. Wahid said to his wife he had never heard of a girl called Natasha except for her. He also said to her that he has no clue what the name means. That day, Wahid returned from his work a couple of hours late. He came late because he worked overtime. As soon as he had his dinner, he excused himself and fell asleep. Natasha could not be able to sleep so early and hence sat at the computer to do some college homework. Suddenly, an idea flashed in her mind, and she decided to find out what the meaning of her name was and whether it was a foreign name or not. When she searched on the internet for the meaning and origin of the name Natasha, she found out it isn't an Arabic name as her mother-in-law had already concluded. It is indeed a foreign name. Natasha means a girl who was born on Christmas Day. It is a Russian female given name, originally the name of Natalia. It is the same as the Latin variant, Natalie, meaning birthday, in reference to the birth of Christ, and was traditionally given to girls born around Christmas in the month of December. Natasha felt so happy when she discovered the meaning and origin of her name. She understood that her Russian grandmother Natasha Alexandrov got that name because she was born and brought up in Moscow, Russia. Therefore, she waited eagerly and excitedly for the evening tea time to come on the following day and share the meaning of her beautiful name with her mother-in-law. I have found the meaning of my name, shouted Natasha happily to Mrs. Mary Morgus when the two sat facing each other with their cups of tea and Sudanese zalabia cakes in their hands. Then, the lovely girl Natasha placed her teacup, lifted her right hand up, and shouted proudly, Natasha means born on Christmas Day when our Lord Jesus was born. It is a Russian female given name, originally of Natalia. It is the same as the Latin variant, Natalie, meaning birthday, in reference to the birth of Christ, and was traditionally given to girls born around Christmas. How did you figure out what Natasha means? I searched the internet. That sounded strange to me. I have never heard any girl has that name except that half-foreigner and half-Sudanese girl and you. Anyway, it has wonderful meaning, and your grandfather chose a name that suits you. Natasha felt so pleased when she heard her mother-in-law praising her. She decided to keep that interesting topic going with the hope that she might hear more praise from Mrs. Mary Morgus. But tell me, Mother, how could you remember the name of a person who came to your orphanage many years ago? Was it because she had a name that you had never heard before or for something to do with the girl herself? I can forget any person I met in my life except that young woman. Although she stayed in our orphanage for a couple of days, her image and name never left my heart and mind for a second. What made her be so special to you, Mother? She is an Arab Muslim girl from the Shurjia tribe. Her father is a Sudanese, and her mother is a white woman. Someone impregnated her before marriage when she was 14 years old. Usually, in a Muslim country like Sudan, when the girl becomes pregnant before marriage, her family would perform honor killing on her. But that girl was lucky enough to have loving and kind parents. Her parents brought her to our orphanage and allowed her to deliver her illegitimate baby. As soon as the baby was born, they entrusted him in our care and left. I have never seen any one of them again. It is incredibly sad to hear her story. I think because of her young age and sad case, that is why she remained always special in your heart and mind. I can't tell you why she is so special to me, but she will always remain very dear to me. Natasha felt it would be impolite to insist on knowing why the girl is special to Mrs. Mary Morgus when she made it clear that she would not tell her the reason. She ignored that topic and began to talk about something else. However, that night while Natasha was sleeping on the bed beside her husband, something suddenly erupted in her mind and drove the sleep out of her eyes. The thought began as wonder and quickly turned into doubt. She wondered why her mother-in-law did not want to tell her why that girl whom she met many years ago remained and would always remain very dear and special to her. The reason could be the age and beauty of that unfortunate girl who was impregnated before marriage in a primitive and backward Muslim country like Sudan. Before answering that question, Natasha suddenly remembered that her mother was also got impregnated before marriage in Sudan and got punished harshly and killed brutally by the Sharia court for committing that same moral mistake. How then did that girl Natasha escape the punishment of the Islamic Sharia court? Could it be because her loving and kind parents protected her and hid her pregnancy from society and the law? Natasha felt that could be the only possible answer in the case of that girl. Then, why her grandparents did not do the same thing with her mother? Because her grandparents died, she understood that she will never get an answer to that question. Natasha knows for sure that she had the most loving and kind grandfather that a fortunate girl could have in life. She dismissed the idea of blaming her late grandparents for not protecting her mother from the cruel Islamic law. The fact that she is alive and being brought up by a very loving grandfather shifted the attention of Natasha from comparing the fate of her mother with that girl, and she began to think of the baby who was born to that girl. She asked herself what had happened to the baby of that girl whom Mrs. Mary Morgus considers so special and dear to her. Natasha's shrewd mind suddenly connected the dots and guessed an answer to her question. She understood immediately why that girl was so special and why Mrs. Mary Morgus is cautious to reveal why she is so dear to her. She concluded that the girl gave birth to an illegitimate son, and that son is none other than her own beloved husband Wahid. Natasha's train of thoughts did not stop at that conclusion, but continued to push the matter further. Suddenly, she realized that she and her husband have the same mother's name, Natasha, the same combination of parents. Father is a Sudanese and the mother is a white woman, same country and city of birth, Sudan, Khartoum. And both were born out of adultery or without the sanctity of the Islamic halal marriage. Her heart had been filled with dread when she thought for a fraction of a second that she and her husband might be real brother and sister. She is struck with sudden paralysis, her ears become deaf and mouth dumb, and the blood frozen in her veins. Meanwhile, her body is perspiring as if she is inside a furnace, but she is feeling so cold as if she suddenly has found herself inside a freezer. It took Natasha a quite long time to overcome that ontological state. Then her heart immediately repulsed that possibility, and her mind revolted against it. Her religious mentality took over and pushed aside that abominable conclusion. She thought that such reasoning came from Satan, and she asked God to forgive her for thinking such a devilish idea. She concluded that the holy and righteous God would never allow such abominable deed to happen to his children. Out of the fear of that possibility rather than God, Natasha has dismissed that satanic thought and fell in an uneasy sleep. Chapter 51. The Abominable Inquiry. Although Natasha pushed aside that possibility and considered it came from Satan still, the abominable question remained in the corner of her subconscious mind. For a few days, she suppressed it and tried to pretend as if nothing happened. Notwithstanding, that nefarious question continued to move inside her mind and trouble her conscience as if it is the lava of molten rock trying to erupt into a volcano and waiting for a small crack in the corner of her mind to explode and destroy her happy married life. When she could not hold it anymore, Natasha decided to investigate that abominable possibility. But she determined to be careful and avoid raising the suspicion of her mother-in-law and hurting her husband. She began her investigation with that newspaper article, which was written over 20 years ago. That 20-year-old article led her when she was in Calgary to make that unpleasant discovery of her true biological father who raped her and almost killed her. When she read that article again, she found a new discovery in it. The article mentioned that the same man had impregnated her mother 2 times without the sanctity of the marriage bond. Then, the article went to say that on the second pregnancy, the Islamic Sharia court in Khartoum arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced her mother to 200 lashes for committing adultery twice. The article mentioned very clearly that the same man who impregnated her mother at first was the same person who made her pregnant for the second time. Then the article stated that the religious court allowed her mother to deliver her second baby before she was flogged to death. The baby was placed in the custody of her grandfather. The grandfather and the baby left Sudan immediately and immigrated to Ethiopia and settled in Addis Ababa, and no one ever heard about them again. What the article failed to mention is what had happened to the first pregnancy. The article mentioned very clearly that her mother was impregnated twice with illegitimate babies. It explained in detail what had happened in the second pregnancy to her mother and the baby. But the article is obscure in the case of the first pregnancy and what had happened to the first baby. Natasha wondered why no one had ever asked that important question before. Although she had read that article many times before, she too failed to ask that essential question. After that abominable possibility arose in her mind, she decided to pursue that important question. She wants to know what happened to the first pregnancy of her late mother. After she found the answer to her first doubt in the article, Natasha understood the second place to look for an explanation is in the mind of her mother-in-law. It was again at tea time when Natasha brought out that persistent question. She asked her mother-in-law to tell her more about that special and dear Natasha. She wanted to know her parents' name, last name, and above all what had happened to the baby she gave birth to in the orphanage, and what was its gender. "Why are you interested in knowing all those details about that girl?" asked Mrs. Mary Morgus worriedly. "Forgive my curiosity, my dear mother, but I am so interested to know everything about that girl. But at least tell me why you want to know everything about her." "Well, I guess I can answer some of those questions myself," said Natasha while she is feeling a bit irritated by Mrs. Mary Morgus' insisting question. Before giving her answers, Natasha waited for a few seconds for Mrs. Mary Morgus' response. When her mother-in-law remained silent, Natasha continued to say, "I believe that girl gave birth to a baby boy, and that baby boy is my husband. For that reason, she always remained so dear to you because she gifted you with a son. Am I right?" Mrs. Mary Morgus looked at Natasha with mistrust and said softly, "Yes, you are absolutely right, but how did you get that information?" "Only my late husband and I know about that hidden secret. I do not think even my son knows anything about his mother. He does not know what her name is. The only thing we told him about his family background is that he was born to a Muslim mother from the tribe of the Shaijia. Even we had guessed her tribe's name. She might even be from either the tribe Joalia or the tribe of Dangala. But we hadn't told him that his grandmother is a white woman and his father is a Sudanese man." "Thank you so much, Mother, for answering my question. I have only guessed that my beloved husband is the son of that Natasha who is so dear to you because she gifted you with a son. Can you answer my other questions now? I want to know what her parents' names and her last name." Mrs. Mary Morgus became more suspicious about Natasha's persistent questions. She looked a bit worried and said, "I don't remember what her parents' names are or her last name is. It is a quite long time since that family came to our orphanage. Everything they told us about themselves was written on the orphanage register. You know, people with such a serious illegal pregnancy problem always hide their true identities. For that reason, I am not sure whether that girl her real name is Natasha or just a fake name created by her parents. Please, my daughter, don't try to dig into that matter. Such an unnecessary inquiry might hurt your husband's feelings. He suffered enough in Sudan because of his odd personality. I know how much my husband had suffered in that backward Islamic religious society. He had told me everything. I promise you now that I will never bother you again with those questions." Although Natasha made that promise to her mother-in-law still, she determined in her heart to pursue her inquiry into the background of her husband. She suspected that Mrs. Mary Morgus purposely lied in order to discourage her from digging into the background of her son for fear of hurting him. So, she pretended to have ignored the inquiry and promised not to bring it up again. Her next step is to get hold of that orphanage register and find out who are the parents of that girl who gave birth to her husband and what is their family name. If she found that register, then her final question would be answered. The answer to that question would decide whether her husband and she are brother and sister, or it is just a coincidence that they happen to have the same mother's names, the same combination of Sudanese father and white woman mother, same place of birth, and both are illegitimate children. It would be a 1 in a million chance if such an agreement turned out to be a mere coincidence. Natasha felt her inquiry would be terminated before it was finished if she could not have access to that register. She wondered whether the orphanage was still functioning although its owners were not there. Did Mrs. Mary Morgus shut down the orphanage after her husband passed away and she moved to Canada? Or did she entrust it into the care of other benevolent people to continue providing shelter to those misfortunate illegitimate children whose mothers want to get rid of them? Natasha understood that only Mrs. Mary Morgus could answer that question. On one hand, if she said the orphanage is still functioning, then Natasha knows her second task is to obtain the address of the orphanage and direct her inquiry to the new owners through a letter. On the other hand, if the orphanage is shut down, then the only person who could tell her where that register is kept would be Mrs. Mary Morgus. Accordingly, Natasha impatiently waited for the tea time and Sudanese jalebia cookies to come. "Mother," said Natasha while forcing a smile on her lips, "I am highly indebted to your husband and you for being such benevolent parents by running that orphanage where my beloved husband got all the love and care. I am also exceedingly thankful to you and to your late husband, Mr. Wahid Morgus, for taking all the troubles by bringing up those 13 rejected and abandoned illegitimate children. You should rather thank the Lord who put it in our hearts to have an orphanage in a country where such a place is illegal to build and bring up children who are illegally born. We took the risk, and the Lord stood by our side. Moreover, you have also to thank those local and foreign churches who used to support us financially. But dear mother, who is taking care of that orphanage after your husband passed away and you came to Canada to live with us? In fact, our orphanage was a long time ago shut down by the Sudanese government when we had been accused of practicing slavery by selling Sudanese children to foreigners. That problem arose when an American couple approached us and proposed to adopt one of our orphanage's children. Natasha had already heard about that sad story from her husband. She remembered her husband told her that a childless American couple from Los Angeles wanted to adopt him and take him to their country, but the government of Sudan interfered and blocked that adoption. Mr. Morgus and the American couple were condemned as practicing slavery deal by trying to sell and buy a Sudanese child, and for that false charges, they got jailed and got flogged. She knows that incident happened when her husband was a small boy. She concluded that it might not be possible for the Morgus family to keep any record for such a long time. She thought she might never have access to that register. It might not be in existence today. It is a very bad thing what the government of Sudan did to the orphanage. Although they shut down the orphanage still, they did not take those 13 children from us. They told us not to take any more children. They instructed us that if any woman comes with an illegitimate baby, we should not accept it. Moreover, we were strictly told that we should never allow any pregnant girl to come and deliver an illegitimate baby in our orphanage. They even told us to report to the police authority any girl who comes to us while she is impregnated out of adultery. Therefore, as soon as those 13 children grew up and left the orphanage, it ceased to function. No one of them came back or contacted us except your husband Gergis Gabriel. He is the one who treated us as his real father and mother and kept writing and phoning us from Canada. He even every now and then sends money to us. But it is absolutely wrong for the government of Sudan to close down such great social and charitable home which meant for orphans and illegal babies. That is incredibly sad for those girls who made such mistakes or got fooled by their boyfriends and impregnated them out of wedlock. Sometimes, some of those Muslim girls might get impregnated through rape by their close male relatives. Such a mistake in Sudan will cost the girl her life and bring great disgrace to her family. I know that, said Natasha while some hot tears are falling from her eyes when she remembered the mistake that cost her mother her life and led to the murder of her Russian grandmother. But she decided to continue hiding her family secret. Therefore, she changed the topic and began to talk about something else.